Imagine walking up to a coin machine in the year 2026, feeding it $1, and getting back a shiny new Trump $1 coin instead of a bill. That might sound strange, but as of October 2025, right now, the U.S. Treasury Department is seriously discussing this, a possibility, and it will help celebrate America's 250th birthday, known as a semi-quincentennial. It could happen. Now, as I speak here in October 2025, we are 3 days into a government shutdown, so there's no way this could happen because the votes won't happen. Government's not working. But if it were to clear up, we still have months to go before this big year, big date, and it's something that people actually might want to happen. However, the proposal builds on centuries of debate over who is worthy of being honored on U.S. money. And we'll get from this essay traces of the histories and controversies behind putting certain people's faces behind coins and bills, giving some special attention to Andrew Jackson and Harriet Tubman. And of course, we will talk deeply, because we have to, about the likelihood and the legality of a Trump $1 coin, how it could happen, and if it does, a slippery slope that could be open from it. Part 1. Why do we even need to put people on money? Money is more than a tool for buying things. The images on coins and bills communicate values, who the nation honors, what heroes it celebrates, and what stories it wants future generations to remember. Over time, the U.S. has used portraits of people to build legitimacy and show continuity and signal progress as we grow. In the early United States, coins often bore things that were more abstract, like liberty or eagles, for the thought of liberty and eagles and freedom and what we could do, and some inscriptions, words to say things to the points. Portraits of real people came later and stirred debate as they came. People were asking, do we want our presidents on our money? Do we want our founding fathers there? Do we want some women that were great in history? How about enslaved people? Whose face best represents our country on our money? Because there's a long-standing rule in U.S. law and tradition. It's written down in law that living persons generally may not appear on U.S. currency. And that rule stems partly from an effort to avoid a monarchy or cult of personality. We'll tell you exactly where the rule came from in some of our details here, but it associates your money with the current ruler if a living president, living person is there. That's why the king is on his money, and it is his money. Same with the queen when it was her money, and now that she's gone and the king has taken over, guess what? His face is on his money. It's not a national thing if it's a national thing. It's about us celebrating us as the U.S. and not as a follower of a certain president or monarch and the shared past that we all have. There are exceptions and controversies that come over time. We'll go through many of those in a bit. And who qualifies and who opposes and who gets left out is a bit more detailed, as you would think it would be. Nothing's ever simple because we are us. We are people. We can't have that. Part 2. The story of Andrew Jackson on money. Andrew Jackson lived from 1767 to 1845. He is a polarizing figure in American history. On one hand, he is often praised as a populist who championed the common man, so people loved him for those things. And then, on the other hand, his policies toward Native Americans, especially the Indian Removal Act and the whole Trail of Tears thing, are widely condemned. Jackson first appeared on the U.S. $20 bill in 1928, and over many decades, that bill became a fixture of everyday life. You talk about 20s, and 20s is your most popular bill, although the smaller bills are used in everyday life as well. But going past 50s and 100s, a 20 is your standard bill for a larger bill. People pay folks in many 20s as opposed to a handful of hundreds because. But starting around the 2010s, activists started wondering whether Jackson was the right man, right president, right person to be on that $20 bill and pushed to replace him because of his controversies. And a portrait of someone more inclusive would maybe help make things work out. In 2016, while still under the Obama administration, but getting close to the next one, the Treasury Department announced they were going to make a replacement, make a swap on the $20 bill. Jackson will be replaced on the front by one Harriet Tubman. Plan got delayed and contested. Jackson's defenders argue that removing him would erase part of history and ignore that some of the history that we have is deeply troubling. Keep that point in mind a bit later. We're going to have a tangent I'm going to hold off to that will go into that part about some history not being so nice. Critics of Jackson say that celebrating someone who forcibly displaced Native Americans, caused so much suffering in the community, is a harmful message that we should stop putting out there. Meanwhile, look at your 20 and you'll see Andrew Jackson, who remains on the $20 bill, and it's not going to be changed anytime soon. The debate around his presence points to a deeper question, though. Should portraits of money reflect only greatness, or should they also help confront shame and injustice? One thing we talked about earlier is the money having the face of a person who's living right now and them being sort of a PowerPoint. We'll get that in a second. Another about money actually telling stories, because money can tell stories and give us more in a way of those things. Part 3. The movement to honor Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman lived from about 1822, no one really knows because she didn't want to tell nobody, and to 1913, and was formerly an enslaved woman who escaped to freedom and then risked her life continuously by going back and forth on the Underground Railroad to bring more folks to freedom. She also worked as a Union Army soldier and getting a posthumous officer's commission and all the things that she could do during the Civil War that you probably can't do right now. And of course, in later years after war was over, an advocate for women's rights. Who else than a woman who ran the Underground Railroad and was a, big time factor as a spy in the Union Army during the Civil War, just showing the capabilities of women. But women and black Americans have been underrepresented in U.S. currency because there's none of them. And so Tubman was an obvious choice to represent women and black Americans. It worked out for inclusion. In 2016, of course, the Treasury planned to put her on the $20 bill and take off Andrew Jackson and recognize the role of black women in shaping America. As we said earlier, that didn't quite happen. The stalling of implementation, timeline kept slipping, political opposition, including from by that time the Trump administration, slowed things down to the point that it just didn't happen. Trump himself actually responded to the idea by calling Tubman fantastic, but saying that replacing Jackson was pure political correctness. Holding on nugget for a while as well. He suggested that she could appear on some other bill instead. What other bill was out there that had a more controversial person? There wasn't. So it passed. Not passing as passing a law to put her on the bill, but the effort to put her on that bill passed and went away. Many supporters of Tubman feel her inclusion would signal a more honest and inclusive telling of American history, not erasing the past, but broadening it. Critics warn that currency is not a place for political messaging or worry about rewriting history to favor one side or the other. Here's where our tangent will come. Now, we're talking here about taking someone off money, replacing someone else for a better story of history. Keeping Jackson on the 20 was essentially said by people at the time that it was a reminder that history isn't always so great. And some people in our history that actually made a lot of impact are a bit dubious. They may have done some good things or show a great position and people may love them, even if some of their actions didn't quite pan out to great activities. For Jackson, all the things with Native Americans are a bad stain of our history, and so we don't celebrate it. Yet we celebrate him by leaving him on the $20 bill. Consequently, right now, specifically for folks who are African American, there was issue years back with the removing of Confederate monuments because of the Civil War and changing of many army bases and many military bases that were named for Confederate generals just because. And names have been changed to things that are either more neutral, somebody honoring people less dealing with that time and place, and of course the statues. However, the current administration is allowing for statues to come back up and changing names. Oh, by the way, there's also issues with history not being so clean, where there's a big push right now to talk about slavery. Part of it started with the 1620 project, but part of it is essentially the fact that slavery wasn't so bad. Literally, wasn't so bad. The people brought over as slaves were able to learn trades and gain stature and have a better life in general, after the whole Civil War thing. And history lessons, history teachings, history books are being written so that those things are softened a bit. They didn't want to take Jackson off the 20. They didn't want to soften that history, but they're softening history now, which tells you something about who writes history. End of tangent. Back to money. Past controversies over money portraits. Over centuries, the U.S. has wrestled with many controversies about who gets put on money. Here's a couple right now, or three technically because I can count. Spencer Clark in 1866. He was a minor official who had his image placed on a 5-cent note, some say illegally, in the first part, which prompted Congress to basically place a law banning living persons on currency. That's where this law comes from. Spencer Clark. Check him out. Doesn't seem like a big deal now, but it's a big deal now because of what we're dealing with Donald Trump. Of course, the debate with In God We Trust, which did not originally show up on our money because it didn't. In the early 20th century, President Theodore Roosevelt actually tried to get it off the money on some coins, which was some public backlash for that one, and a law that basically reasserted its use, made sure that it was going to be on all the money going forward. How it got there, another great story. No time for you in this video, but check it out as well. And of course, the biggest piece of this whole video was the Tubman versus Jackson plan, the pushback for updating this 20 to be more inclusive, more with the times, more something that's a greater point of history. And of course, didn't happen. Delayed, postponed, criticized, and reversed in both symbolism and the fight for the political right to do this. Critics often invoke tradition and legal constraints to avoid things like this, blocking change in general and blocking the change of change. Supporters actually argue that money should reflect evolving values. It should not be so harsh, should not be so strict. We should do this to reflect things that are growing. Big issue is going back to Donald Trump. When somebody wants to put Trump on a coin, dollar coin, not a $100 bill or anything like that, the list of issues to not do it, the precedents, the rules, and arguments, is pretty long to get through. But Donald Trump has a knack for working through, let's just say, red tape and paperwork and making things that don't seem like they make any sense, make sense for him and his crowd, and kind of get done. Part 5, the proposed Trump $1 coin. In October 2025, right now as we record this video, media outlets are reporting that the U.S. Treasury is considering this issue. A $1 coin featured Donald Trump's likeness to mark the 250th anniversary of America's independence, something to go along as a trinket to be a part of the celebration. The preliminary draft is pretty simple. The design is something that is shared by the U.S. Treasury Department of what it could look like, with one side having inscriptions of liberty, In God We Trust, and the dates 1776 and 2026, just like any other coin, just like any other thing we mint. The other side, the reverse image, has something that's a bit more symbolic. It shows Trump with his clenched fist in front of American flag and the phrase, "Fight, fight, fight." This is a reference to his words after surviving the assassination attempt in 2024. The immediate objections were pretty quick, pretty strong too. There are legal objections, constitutional objections, and just tradition that we sort of try to live by. Part 6, legal and traditional barriers to the Trump coin. Under U.S. law and longstanding practice, portraits of currency are generally limited to dead persons. In the 2020 Circulating Collective Coin Redesign Act, hard to say that one than in quincentennial, lets the Treasury issue special $1 coins in 2026 for this semi-quincentennial. It allowed them to do that. They saw this 6 years ago and said, we can do something for this thing, but it still prohibited portraits of living persons on the reverse side and the head and shoulder busts of living or deceased individuals on the reverse. Semantics. Trump is still alive, placing his strong, recognizable likeness on either side of coin, conflicting with the rules, and some legal experts argue that the draft avoids direct violations because the profile is on the averse and the reverse has a stylized but not full bust. It is basically loopholes, seeing ways to make it work, a little bit of a, but if we do it like this way, can we make it happen? Whether this one will hold up and get minted, is unclear. Minted because they're coins, not because they're bills. Of course, there's a whole other law about this. It actually says only the portrait of a deceased individual may appear on United States currency and securities, which some people say only the portrait of a deceased individual may appear. And if only a deceased may appear, Donald Trump is not deceased. He may be being honored on his coin because of an assassination attempt that did not go through, but he's not deceased. He cannot get this honor because, as I said 4 times now, he's not deceased. Now, there's also the traditional backlash from the public on these things in general. Beyond the legal texts, the tradition is important to many as well. For nearly 2 centuries, there's been no sitting or living president on any circulating coins or bills in their full portrait form. And doing so would be breaking a strong norm that we've had for a while, intended to make sure that we did not celebrate a king, a monarch, a person who is in charge of things, and give them all the props of being on our money. It's something that the king does overseas in England, not here. Public opinion might view such a coin as self-aggrandizing, another word I butcher all the time, and authoritarian, which we talk a lot about with Donald Trump as being self-aggrandizing and authoritarian. We talk about it here on our Conversation Project main channel, and we do that some here in some things we popped in for the history side of things. It is something that history will have to take a look at unless things never change. But in the moment right now, public opinion doesn't quite see this as a good thing. Now, opponents may also see this as using state power to promote a person rather than the ideas and national symbols, essentially propping up Donald Trump as our president, as our leader, on the coins, on the money we carry in our pockets, as opposed to the symbol of America as the experiment it is, the Constitution being what we live by, not by the words of a person in particular. And here's the thing. Even the Treasury wants to actually make this thing happen, Congress has to basically pay for it and pass laws to say it's good enough to do. They have to say, go forth and print them coins, mint them coins, and stamp them quickly. And right now, Congress not getting anything done because while we're talking about it, now would be the time to make it happen and put it into some sort of process. Congress is not doing much because they can't vote on keeping the government open. Opponents could block the funding when they do go back to work and pass narrow legislation to overrule the decision, the design to make it all go away. Or someone can sue in court because they believe it's a law that this can't happen and don't want it broken. Courts would then be asked to weigh in whether the new coin violates statutory and constitutional limits, and then we got to actually get the damn thing minted. Part 7. So how likely is a Trump dollar coin to happen? We've talked about the obstacles, many of them that we can pop up here, but there's plenty of other reasons not to do it, just like there might be reasons that the administration or Donald Trump would say to do it. But the creation of the $1 coin with Trump's likeness is possible. We're going to leave it at that, but not quite so possible that we can say there's a large percent chance it's going to happen. Non-zero, but not close to 99. The Treasury may actually try to thread a very narrow legal needle to make it possible and design the images to avoid some direct conflict with the rules about the portraits and reverse busts. Maybe they could caricature it so it's not a pure picture, but we know how Trump is about caricatures. They also have to deal with the political costs to be high with this one, and maybe the actual cost of it, because we know that coins tend to cost more than they're actually worth. So is a dollar coin that's legally tendered to be spent as a dollar going to be able to be minted for 95 cents or less? We'll see. Now, if it does get minted, it would be a first. First time a living or recently deceased president will be honored on a circulating U.S. currency at this level. It would set a precedent that could open a door, Pandora's box, if you will, to more controversial and partisan proposals in the future. Maybe some by Donald J. Trump. So there are the possibilities. But with the possibilities, there are the oddities that come along with it. Maybe a future president who commands a large base of supporters might push for his or her own coin, because they do, especially during some sort of celebration or anniversary. The stars are aligning right now for this, but we haven't quite got there yet. Presidents whose policies were the vices, including folks like Nixon or Johnson, or some more recent presidents, could now be put on our coin and money because someone may push for it. They become candidates for these collapsed norms to just put general folks that people want on there. Maybe not liked or disliked, but historical, I guess. The path could also extend to the first ladies. Melania, since she has a Bitcoin-like crypto just like Donald does, could get a coin as well. Vice presidents could get one as well. Political figures all over the place. Your Nancy Pelosi coin could be minted any day now. Once those doors crack open, Pandora's box, if you will, arguments about honoring public service versus avoiding political propaganda will definitely go to the upper echelon. And so, to summarize this thing, which is more scarier than it was when I began reading this actual script, the U.S. has always carried a tension in choosing who appears on its money. It's always been a thing where you got to really think about it. Portraits reflect power, ideals, and debates about memory. Andrew Jackson's presence on the 20 was deeply controversial and continues to be, given his record of indigenous removal. And the ongoing push to put Harriet Tubman in this place, an historic figure in a struggle for freedom and equality, got put in its place, literally, as the place in history got washed away because of the placement of the original person on the dollar, or $20 bill, if you will. And it talks about how America wants to tell its story in its money, or continue telling its stories in its money. But the newly proposed Trump $1 coin is unprecedented in modern U.S. history. Legal rules against putting living people on currency, plus long tradition and likely political opposition, make it a risky move, but not a move that Donald Trump would not be opposed to making happen. But if it happens, it would open floodgates for future presidents or divisive figures to demand their place on coins or bills. So anybody who's at a place of high echelon that thinks they can pull it off will put it into place and try to pull it off, whether they can or not. Whether this becomes real, the Trump coin or not, it's going to be weird. Now, the draft is a bit provocative, and it forces us to ask the serious questions about the stories we want our money to tell. A literal story about the assassination attempt of Donald Trump will be on the back end of this coin. Who, if anyone, should be above critique when it comes to being memorialized in metal, Donald Trump specifically, and why is this a national issue? Because we must have issues. Thank you for taking in this history take here on our side channel from the Conversation Project. We are mostly about conversations on pop culture and current events, but here we get a chance to take some of the thought processes and make them into historical sort of long form things. We talked about how Benjamin Franklin may have been the Ric Flair of his time. We talked about how lottery winners, when the pot was up to another historic high, have basically realized after winning lotteries it was the wrong thing to do. And now we're talking about money, literally, with Donald Trump possibly getting a new coin. Is there a history topic or some sort of thing you want us to delve into? Comment about it or send an email to our Conversation Project inbox. That is literally the conversation inbox at gmail.com, and let us know what history thing you can do, or just conversate with us about things going forward. Make sure you follow us on our main channel at the Conversation Project as well, and sign up for our newsletter to get the daily dose of new stuff, including a short little version of that newsletter in video form here, podcasted form here, with this day in history or things you might not have heard history-wise. We give you that to you every day of the week, 7 days a week, with 12 history lessons, 12 things happened on this day, plus 7 people born and 7 people who died on this day, and a short version of it, 3, 3, and 3, on this channel for your pleasure or your learning and going back and forth. We love history, we love learning, we love doing this stuff, we love rambling, as you see as well. So we're going to wrap this thing up here and let you give us some comments about the Trump coin or coins in general, or Andrew Jackson or Harriet Tubman, or the history we do around here. Thank you so much for supporting what we do and supporting history, which is the most important thing about this channel, what we do.